Jerry Collins. They called him the Terminator, and you knew why the second he lined you up. If Jerry Collins hit you, it wasn't a tackle, it was a hospital referral. He was an all-black flanker, the enforcer for the Hurricanes, and played 48 tests between 2001 and 2007. To New Zealand fans, he was the hard edge of their pack. To everyone else, he was the nightmare wearing black. In 2003 against Wales, he drilled Colin Charvis so hard the Welsh captain went off concussed. Same year, World Cup semi-final, Collins smashed Nathan Sharp and folded him like a deck chair. Both hits still get replayed today because they summed him up perfectly. Ruthless, clean, and absolutely terrifying. What made him feared wasn't just the highlights, it was the consistency. He didn't switch it on now and then, he hunted every single week. Players admitted they felt targeted when he was opposite them. You could brace all you wanted, but Collins still put you flat. Jerry Collins wasn't just a flanker, he was a demolition contractor in boots. Alesana Tuilagi. Alesana was the kind of winger who made defenders hesitate before stepping up. At 6'1" and over 110 kilos, he was built like a loose forward but lined up out wide. That combination made him one of the most destructive runners of the modern era. At Leicester Tigers, he was a cult hero, scoring 63 tries in 162 appearances and helping them to premiership titles. For Samoa, he was even more frightening, their go-to weapon whenever they wanted to run straight through a defensive line instead of around it. His reputation was built on moments you couldn't forget. In 2005 at Twickenham, his high tackle on Mark Cueto set off a full brawl that saw him and Lewis Moody both sent off. 10 years later at the 2015 Rugby World Cup, he was still feared enough to draw headlines, earning a 5-week ban for dropping a knee into Harumichi Tatakawa. What made him feared was simple. When Alesana had the ball, you couldn't stop him one-on-one. Tacklers either went backwards or stayed down. Alesana Tuilagi redefined what a winger could be. Less sidestep, more sledgehammer. Sebastian Chabal. One look at Sebastian Chabal and you understood why opponents called him the caveman. With the wild beard and the glare, he looked like he'd walked straight out of a prehistoric battlefield, and he played the same way. Blunt, brutal, and absolutely terrifying to line up against. A lock and back row forward, Chabal earned 62 caps for France between 2000 and 2011. He played his club rugby with Bourgoin, Sale Sharks, and Racing Metro, becoming as much a cult figure in England as he was at home. At Sale, he helped deliver a premiership title in 2006, but what people remember most wasn't silverware, it was the collisions. In 2007, during a World Cup warm-up against New Zealand, Chabal flattened all-black flanker Chris Meso so hard that fans still trade the clip online. Then there was the Monster 15 exhibition, where the opposition literally kicked the ball straight to Chabal and sent half their team charging at him just to bring him down. That moment summed him up perfectly. One man who needed a mob to stop, and in general play, his tackles were just as frightening. Chabal was bone-rattling in every contact, the kind of hitter who could change the mood of a game with a single collision. But it wasn't just the hits. Chabal carried himself with a kind of raw menace. Even referees admitted he was intimidating. With the hair, the beard, and the stare, he looked like he belonged in a different century. And when he thundered into contact, players genuinely second-guessed whether they wanted the ball. What made him feared was that aura. Plenty of players can hit hard. Not many make crowds roar in anticipation every time they line up a tackle. Chabal didn't just stop opponents, he humiliated them. Sebastian Chabal wasn't just a player, he was rugby's nightmare dressed up as a cult hero. Henry Tuilagi was the biggest and scariest of the Tuilagi clan, and that's saying something. At 6'1" and nearly 130 kilos, he wasn't just powerful, he was terrifying. When Henry carried the ball, defenders didn't so much tackle him as hang on and pray they'd survive the landing. He made his name at Leicester Tigers, where he bulldozed through premiership defences, and for Samoa, where he became their most feared forward. His runs were pure chaos, straight lines, no sidesteps, just violence in motion. Even seasoned internationals dreaded seeing him coming. One of his most famous moments came in a premiership match against London Irish, when he steamrolled through multiple tacklers in a single carry and left bodies scattered behind him. His collisions were so brutal that teammates admitted they felt safer when Henry was on their side. Injuries cut his Test career short, but his legend was built less on stats and more on the memories he left in opposition players' ribs. Facing Henry was never about stopping him, it was about bracing for impact, and that's what made him the scariest Tuilagi of them all. Jacques Burger. Burger built a reputation as one of the toughest tacklers the game has ever seen. Playing flanker for Namibia and Saracens, he wasn't the biggest man on the field, but he played like he had no regard for his own body or yours. He threw himself into collisions with a kind of reckless abandon that made people wince. In one premiership match, he set a record with 36 tackles. That wasn't just hard work, that was a masterclass in defensive brutality. At Saracens, he became the kind of player fans loved because they knew he'd bleed for the jersey, and usually did. His face always seemed patched up with cuts, bruises and bandages, but he never pulled out of a hit. For Namibia, he carried the same ferocity onto the World Cup stage, proving that no matter who he played for, he brought the same ferocious intent. Burger wasn't feared because he was dirty. He was feared because he was relentless. The kind of flanker who put heart, soul and body on the line every single time he played. Jacques Burger wasn't just tough, he was rugby's crash test dummy, built to break himself and everyone in front of him. Josua Tuisova. For Rugby knows him as the human bulldozer, built like a centre but running like a freight train, and when he gets moving, there aren't many in World Rugby willing to stand in his way. A product of Fiji, Tuisova made his name in sevens before switching to 15s with Toulon, where he became a crowd favourite in the top 14 and Champions Cup. From there, he just carried on the same way, relentless, direct and devastating. Give him the ball and defenders got dropped while he powered towards the try line. He's feared because he combines raw power with the explosiveness of a sprinter. At the 2016 Rio Olympics, he bulldozed through defenders on the way to Fiji's first ever Olympic gold in rugby sevens. In 15s, his highlights are a mix of brutal fends that launch tacklers backwards and carries that need 3 or 4 men to bring him down. Opponents say tackling him feels like running into a wall that keeps moving forward, smashing through tackles and tearing apart defensive systems all at once. Josua Tuisova is a true icon of the game, and every time he takes the field, it's chaos worth watching. Manu Tuilagi. Manu has been England's most destructive centre of the modern era, the kind of player who made world-class defenders look like they'd wandered into the wrong sport. At around 110 kilos with pace to burn, he's been a nightmare at centre. He broke into the scene with Leicester Tigers and soon made his mark for England in the 2012 Six Nations, tearing through the Irish midfield and leaving tacklers hanging on like they'd accidentally grabbed an electric fence. He didn't stop there. Later on, in a test against the All Blacks, he bulldozed past Dan Carter to set up a famous try and even grabbed one himself with an intercept as England shocked New Zealand 38-21. That day, Manu had a cracking game. Every time he touched the ball, New Zealand's defence panicked. He smashed through tackles, made big carries up the middle and kept the All Blacks on the back foot. England fans still talk about that game because Manu didn't just compete with the best team in the world, he bullied them. What makes Manu feared isn't just the collisions but the inevitability. Everyone in the stadium knows he's coming. Tacklers bounce off, trailing in his wake, and often need 2 or 3 to bring him down. Now signed with top 14 side Bayonne, he's closed the book on a 13-year England career with 60 caps, but he hasn't lost that destructive edge. He is still very much a midfield wrecking ball, and every time he steps onto the field, you know you're in for a show. Schalk Burger. Schalk was the kind of flanker who seemed to enjoy collisions more than tries. If there was a ruck to smash, a body to hit, or a scrap to get involved in, you could bet he'd be first there with that blonde mop flying around. He became a Springbok icon, winning over 80 caps and playing a huge part in South Africa's 2007 World Cup triumph. His style wasn't pretty, but it was brutally effective. High work rate, bone-jarring tackles, and a fearless edge that made him one of the most feared forwards of his era. One of his trademarks was sheer relentlessness. He never stopped. Whether it was a test against the All Blacks or a club game with the Stormers, Burger would throw his body into tackles like a man trying to break through a wall with his head. Opponents said the collisions with him hurt twice, once on impact and again the next morning. His breakout came early. In 2004, he was named World Player of the Year, proof of how quickly his ferocious style had turned him into the face of South African rugby. From that point on, every opponent knew they were in for 80 minutes of punishment. He wasn't flawless. Suspensions for dangerous play followed him, but that only added to his reputation. Burger wasn't about finesse. He was raw chaos in a number 6 jersey, and every opposing player in World Rugby knew it. Mamuka Gorgodze. He was known as Gorgodzilla, a nickname his Georgian teammates gave him because trying to stop him was like squaring up to a movie monster. For over a decade, he led the Lilos with the kind of physicality that made even Tier 1 nations wary. He threw himself into collisions without hesitation, smashing carriers backwards and making every contact feel personal while clearing rucks like they were bar fights. One of his most iconic moments came in the 2011 World Cup against England, when he battered their pack so relentlessly that commentators started comparing him to a one-man army. He ended that tournament as one of the top tacklers and most talked about forwards. Not bad for a player from a so-called minnow nation, but it wasn't just World Cups. Week in, week out at Montpellier in France's top 14, he terrorised opponents with his raw aggression. Fans loved him because he never backed down. Rivals feared him because he didn't know how to. Jerome Kaino. Kaino was built for intimidation. At 6'5" and 110 kilos, he wasn't just another all-black loose forward, he was the one who hit hardest. His tackles were the kind that made crowds gasp and ball carriers question if they'd made the right career choice. Over 80 caps for New Zealand, he was central to their back-to-back World Cup wins in 2011 and 2015. While Richie McCaw got the headlines for leadership, Kaino brought the raw violence. He patrolled the blind side like a bouncer, cutting down runners with thudding hits and wrapping up players like a giant werewolf. One of his most infamous moments came against Wales when he smashed Bradley Davies so hard the Welsh lock barely knew what postcode he was in. It summed him up perfectly. Precise, ruthless, and merciless. What made him feared wasn't recklessness, but consistency. Every test, every carry, every tackle, Kaino delivered the same punishment. He wasn't just part of a great All Black team, he was the enforcer inside it, the one who made sure opponents left with bruises as souvenirs. Nonu was the All Black centre you didn't want running at you. Big, fast and built like a flanker, he turned the number 12 jersey into a weapon. Defenders knew what was coming. Straight lines, heavy contact, and very little sympathy. Across more than 100 caps for New Zealand, he became a two-time World Cup winner, part of that legendary midfield with Conrad Smith. Smith brought the brains, Nonu brought the brutality. He'd blast through the gain line, offload in traffic, and leave tacklers staring at the ground. One of his most memorable moments came in the 2015 World Cup final. Nonu scored a brilliant solo try, slicing through Australia's defence and showing he wasn't just about brute force, but make no mistake, the reason he was feared was the hits. From Super Rugby with the Hurricanes to Test Rugby against the Springboks, he left defenders winded and wondering what just hit them. What set him apart was the mix, sheer power one moment, a slick offload the next. You never knew which version of Nonu you were getting until it was too late. He redefined what it meant to be a centre, and every nation in World Rugby had to find a way to deal with him. Tomas Lavanini. Lavanini is 6'7" of Argentinian aggression. At nearly 125 kilos, he's been the Pumas enforcer for the last decade, and he's built a reputation as one of the most intimidating locks in World Rugby. When he channels that aggression, he's devastating, smashing rucks, hammering carriers, and making it his personal mission to dominate collisions. But he's also been one of the most penalised players of his era, holding the record for the most yellow cards in rugby championship history. That mix of brute force and unpredictability is exactly why opponents have always braced themselves when he's on the pitch. His career is full of flashpoints. He's been sent off against South Africa, sided against New Zealand, and famously shown a red card for a high tackle on Owen Farrell in 2019. For fans, those moments cemented his image as both terrifying and combustible. But when he gets it right, he's a world-class lock. He's been central to Argentina's rise in the modern game. That mix of raw power, volatility, and sheer presence is why opponents still see him as one of the most feared locks of his time. Ellis Genge. They call him the baby rhino, and it fits. Every carry, every collision, Genge charges in like he's trying to smash straight through anything in his way, and most of the time he does. He made his name at Leicester Tigers, where his rampaging runs turned him into a crowd favourite, and now at Bristol he's carried on the same way. For England, he's been the kind of prop who doesn't just scrum, he smashes. Low body height, legs pumping, tacklers left in a heap, you know what's coming, and you still can't stop it. One of his biggest statements came against Ireland in the 2022 Six Nations. Genge battered his way through defenders, carrying with such venom that even the Irish pack admitted afterwards he was a nightmare to bring down. That game showed exactly why he's feared. It's not just strength, it's the attitude. Genge plays with fire. Sometimes it spills into scuffles, sometimes it's just a glare after a hit, but it's always there. He doesn't ease into games, he explodes into them. Ellis Genge isn't your average prop. He's the baby rhino, and when he's charging at you, you're getting flattened. Taqele Naiyaravoro. Naiyaravoro is the winger built like a forward. At 6'5" and over 120 kilos, watching him charge down the touchline is like watching a lorry drift onto a cycle lane. He first made his name with the Waratahs in Super Rugby, where his size and speed turned him into a human highlight reel. Defenders line him up, only to get steamrolled or shoved aside with that giant fend. From there, he's gone on to Glasgow, Northampton and Japan with the Green Rockets, and most recently he signed with Narbonne in France. He has test caps for Australia and also represented Fiji in sevens, but no matter where he plays, the story is the same. Give him the ball and watch the defenders go flying. One of his most memorable runs came in Super Rugby when he bulldozed through half the Cheetahs' backline to score. It's the perfect snapshot of why he's feared. Too big for backs, too fast for forwards. Naiyaravoro doesn't just play on the wing, he terrorises it. Every time he gets the ball with space, you know someone's about to end up in the highlights reel for the wrong reason. Jonah Lomu. Jonah Lomu wasn't just a rugby player, he was the first true superstar of the sport. In the mid-90s, he turned rugby from a game into a spectacle, and even people who'd never watched a match knew his name. Kids in England, France, South Africa, Fiji, New Zealand, they all wanted to be Jonah, but opponents, they just wanted to avoid him. The fear came from the combination nobody had seen before, the speed of a sprinter in the body of a heavyweight. Once he had the ball in space, you could almost feel the dread ripple through a defensive line. There was no safe way to tackle him. Go high and you'd get swatted. Go low and you'd get trampled. The moment that defined him came in the 1995 World Cup semi-final against England. Jonah scored 4 tries. One of them saw Mike Catt flattened so brutally that the replay has lived for decades. That match didn't just make headlines, it changed rugby's image forever. The game had a global icon and he was terrifying. But he wasn't just feared. He inspired a generation of players and kids who wanted to run through opponents the way he did. Direct, ruthless, unstoppable. Jonah Lomu wasn't simply a winger, he was the face of rugby, the man who made the whole world sit up and watch. Eben Etzebeth is the modern answer to rugby's long tradition of fearsome enforcers. Playing lock for South Africa's Springboks since 2012, he is a colossus in green and gold to this very day. Standing 6'8", he doesn't just take up space, he owns it. Every stride carries the kind of power that makes opponents second-guess their decisions. His presence in the line-out is like a shadow falling over the pitch. And let's not even talk about his long arms. They snap the ball from the air with an authority that screams out loud. Etzebeth's durability is equally staggering. He smashed through Victor Matfield's once untouchable record of international caps, not by quietly lasting the distance, but by raging through each game with relentless grit. He's always busy wrecking rucks, clearing mauls, and delivering body shots that knock the wind right out of rivals. You don't just see Etzebeth in a game, you feel him. And yet, he's more than brute power. He's unafraid to challenge the narrative, even standing nose to nose with referees when he feels the Springboks are wronged. Few players have the audacity, and fewer still the presence to pull it off without instantly being dismissed. Time and again, Etzebeth has carried South Africa through grinding matches, becoming the backbone when pressure mounts. Even his opponents credit him for that. When he is in the lineup, the tone of the match shifts. He brings that primal fear factor, the reminder that rugby is still a game of collisions, dominance, and willpower. In him, the ancient tradition of intimidation is alive and roaring. Bakkies Botha. If rugby had to choose one figure to define raw, uncompromising physicality, the answer might well be Bakkies Botha. From 2002 to 2014, the towering South African lock was feared by friend and foe alike, and for good reason. Every time he entered a ruck, it was with the intent of destruction. He didn't just clear bodies, he scattered them, delivering tackles that felt like collisions with steel. His speed combined with brutal force turned him into one of the most punishing forwards the game has ever known. Botha quickly earned a reputation for confrontation, as he never shied away from the dark corners of the sport. Opponents braced themselves when he was nearby because where Bakkies went, pain often followed. His disciplinary record was as notorious as his highlight reels. He received bans for stamping, run-ins over alleged eye gouges, and plenty of heated scraps along the way. And yet, it was precisely that edge that made him such a cornerstone of the Springboks. In scrums, he was immovable, a slab of concrete anchoring the pack. In open play, he was relentless, charging with no thought of self-preservation. only dominance. To play against Botha was to endure a battle, as every single contact became a test of courage. But beyond the violence, there was a strange purity to his game. He wasn't reckless for the sake of it, he was just uncompromising in his pursuit of dominance. He defended his team like a man defending territory, and that's why he's remembered as the steel in the second row, the one who rattled every opponent unlucky enough to cross him. If you enjoyed this, there are plenty more rugby videos in the works. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.